EP7 was the acronym for Empowered for Purpose in 7 Steps. And what had happened was I had already was a bit of a personal development junkie for like over a decade at that time. And then I was coaching for a long time, several years by then. And I was always into principles and processes. I always loved the idea of empowering someone else to understand the principles and the processes behind problem solving. So I loved self-coaching. I wanted to always teach people to self-coach themselves, not to undermine the coaching profession, but to know that, why would you just coach someone to improve in a situation, but not also teach them to fish as well? It doesn't mean they don't like fishing with you and they loved your lived experience and they loved how you can hold space for them. And sometimes when you're in the thick of an emotional state, it's great to have someone outside of you who's not burdened by your distorted perception, who's had lived experience, who could easily just see what's going on in the patterns and ask the right questions and get you out of the fog. So it's a beautiful thing. But what about those times when you can self-reflect and have quality analyzing of what's going on? See, a lot of the reasons why we get analysis paralysis is because our analysis is flawed. There are loaded assumptions hiding in the way we analyze that keep the blind spots to the very ideas of how we're accidentally sabotaging ourselves and the very ideas that would solve it. So we end up getting really exhausted, don't we? Mm-hmm. And so teaching quality self-analysis was something that EP7 was all about, but it directed it for a meaningful life. So empowered for purpose, right? So basically the 7 steps were really about who are you? Why are you powerful? How can you understand when you're trapped into a perception that's not serving you? How can we prove to you that everything in you is already there from universal wisdom, that your brain's just wired to block in areas where you need it? And what is the role of your imagination and intuition into a flow state in that? Where have you been in flow? What's blocking that flow? How do you turn it back on? And turn it back on not just to sort out your survival challenges, but now to actually go to another level and make life meaningful, empowered for purpose, in every aspect of your life, so that you're not trying to find purpose in a career as if that's what purpose is limited to. But no, it's multidimensional. It's like purpose is created and our purpose is at the mercy of our imagination. And so we learn to create purpose in our roles, our relationships, for our goals, and that's ongoing. And then you ultimately end up loving being a work in progress, managing your perception, and that each level you reach, there's a glass ceiling waiting for you when you dream bigger, and that's normal, and you're not offended by your newfound limitations preventing you from getting there, and you just embrace the perception management processes of deconstructing that perception and reconstructing, and then also being resilient, aligning in the areas where you're volatile and you're trying to create new habits, and just being compassionate to yourself in that wobble as you get strategic, like change management principles, and you learn how to really achieve that new default version that doesn't try to be that way. It just is.
That was a very good summary.
That's
George.
EP7.
A+ for you. I think for me, I can.
A+ for me. I'm a winner.
One thing that I really found, because I've been through the EP7 course, and the few key nuggets that I got out of it, and one of the things that I got out of it was the empowerment principles that really opened my eyes to, oh my gosh, I didn't even have a principle before.
You did.
I mean, but I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And you put it in front of me, and so that was one thing and I drive to those principles now. And then also I found the deconstruction very, very challenging. That's why I was laughing. I remember how I used to go.
I know, because you're hard on yourself.
Yeah, and
we almost had to do an assessment on you being too hard on yourself in the assessments.
Man. And I actually felt like curling up into a fetal position every time we had those deconstruction sessions, because you had to let all of your negativity out. And I'm the guy that I wouldn't air my negative thoughts. And so for me, that was very confronting for me to sit down and go, okay, let's dig up the dirt and let's feel all these emotions, because in order for you to deconstruct, you need to feel those emotions. And I always avoid those emotions, like I don't want to dabble in that. I only want to have good feelings. And so that was very, very eye-opening as we go through the sessions. And I went, oh, okay, and then the third bit was that, having the different perceptions, like you always talk about, having fixed perceptions, this topic about the clinic and, how you got me to see my family in a different way. And now that's changed my feelings towards them and how I'm constantly improving that now. And
that's an example, like I was saying earlier, that what reality are you in? It's the one you have loaded with what you insist it is.
Yeah.
The same family is a completely different family to you now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's why I say to people when they do EP7, please don't change your job. Please don't change your environment. If you can, sometimes you have to. But if you can, don't change it, because I want you to see the power of your transformation upon the same environment to make you realize that the true environment is what you decide it is.
Very powerful.
Yeah,
And I think that's why people make rash decisions thinking, if I quit this job, I'm going to go somewhere else. They're going to get the same thing, because the transformation hasn't happened internally. They're carrying all of that old self to the new place.
Yeah, you pack your bags, your baggage, and you take it elsewhere.
That's right.
And unpack it on the new environment. And slowly you accidentally condition everyone into the same dynamics of what your subconscious insists is reality.
And it's almost like you're pulling the same outcomes, the same reactions, the same perceptions of the people because of the way you're behaving in the, so like you said, you're packing the bags just to go to another place, only to know that it's the same thing. So having that internal transformation without having to move anywhere, and then seeing your transformation and go, hey, you know what? Everything's changing now. Like you said, everything's the same, but everything's changing. And I think the third thing that I learned a lot about this one is the fractals. So there's an episode in there, there's a chapter about fractals and how there's an example that you gave about a king. If you want to be a king and a queen, you need to have certain characteristics in order for you to be able to make sure the economy is running smoothly, make sure that people are being fed. And you need to have certain qualities. And so that got me thinking about, what are my daily habits that are contributing to who I am? And I can't expect a different outcome if I don't change my fractals, if I don't change my habits. That's how I connected that bit. And I started going for walks. I started changing my internal dialogue, at work, and just changing everything and going, this is who I want to be, but I can't expect the same shit if I was to follow the same old Aslan.
Yeah.
That was a big one as well, that shift. And then obviously the imagination bit, I remember this was crazy. My imagination has been dead since I was young. Like, I forgot how to imagine, right? And so I came in wanting.
But hang on a minute. You were you created really cool, funny skits.
Yeah, but
so that was one of your.
That was one of my outlets.
It was evidence that you had creativity, you had an imagination.
Yeah.
But I understand what you're saying. It got blocked everywhere else.
Yeah. I could not imagine myself. The example that I gave George was, I have a dream car, and the last 20 years I've been dreaming the same visualization, the same garage, the same lighting for 20 years. I've not changed it at all, and I was, why? There's so many things that you can change: where you're at, what the air smells like, the temperature, what you're wearing. I could not go that far. And so you taught me how to use my imagination. And I remember sitting down and feeling a sense of euphoria when I was imagining myself eating steak in some high building in Italy, overlooking the vineyards, having this really nice steak, and feeling the joy of eating that steak and actually feeling it. And it was like, what? I can do this? I did not know I could do this. And so that changed a lot as well. That changed, so many things, man. So I definitely vouch for this program. I mean, obviously you have to be all in. And like I said,
this is not a product placement commercial.
No. I really.
We've got steak knives as a special promotion
for $10.
So you can cut your steak that you're imagining.
No, I'm just so blown away by it, and it really changed me. I think this was the best thing that I did for my 40th. And the fact that I'm continuing this journey and really, identifying more nuggets, it really empowers me, man. I feel so powerful. That's what I feel like now. It's just different.
Yeah.
So
one of the challenges when you're trying to create any kind of journey or program is that you don't want it to be cerebral. You don't want it just to be intellectual, where you're learning ideas and you're trying to think better. Because that is such a one-dimensional way of trying to improve your life.
Right.
And so one of the limitations of doing any program is, can the program get you to add layers to your lifestyle daily that expand beyond the intellectual, right? And so that's why brain training, form of meditation, that's why intuition development disciplines and creativity disciplines, so that we're not just analyzing and deconstructing perception, we are nurturing our flow state, we're de-stressing, we're trying to create a wholeness of being and a balancing of using more of our brain, right and left.
Yeah.
And so that we can start to actualize precious dimensions of ourselves beyond a philosophy, beyond wanting something to be true, to actually start to experience it, And it takes the person true commitment and courage to commit to doing the work, because obviously we've taken, 1,500 people probably by now through the program. And so I've witnessed, the difference between people who engage fully and people who just do the bare minimum.
Yeah.
Even the bare minimum, they think it's great, but doing courses and going away, loving what you learned and having some wins is barely a success for me, because I spent 150 grand over a decade because I was a personal development junkie, 14 trips to America in 4.5 years.
Wow.
Just a real, I loved learning, and travel was fun for that. And a lot of that money was to travel to these places, right? But the point is that I would go home and it would kind of slowly, the old world would reclaim me back, because I didn't calibrate enough of what I was learning into my identity, into my perception, and into habits. And so it's like when you are at work and you're doing a course, and you get all excited. You think, I'm going to go back to my desk and I'm going to be so organized after doing this priority management course.
Yeah.
Or, oh my gosh, I'm going to be such a great negotiator after this negotiation workshop with everyone. And then suddenly you notice that 90% of it kind of wasn't translating the way you felt it should based on that course.
Yes.
So I have to say that 80% of what I knew had to happen in EP7 was about application.
Yes.
Only 20% was to build the credibility for you to go all in on doing the work for application. But it had to be about application, because I'd already suffered 10 years of building a dam of knowledge and only letting a bit of the water trickle down the creek on the other side of that dam. And even that was precious, and it kept me going. What about opening up more and letting that flow, It does take a lot of commitment, doesn't it?
It does. And remember the conversation I had with you about, I've always spent, I'm like you, I love self-improvement topics. And for 20 years, I've been listening to tapes every single day. Every single day I'm listening to podcasts and tapes. And there comes a point in time where you have to put the book down and you have to apply. And that was like I remember I told you the gauge, I was like 95% learning, 5% applying. Now my job is to shift all of my knowledge now to go 50-50 at least. Let me learn 50% and let me apply. So whenever I catch myself to go, I want to listen to this podcast, I go, no, I'm going to imagine, I'm going to implement what I know. I'm going to start imagining. Like you said, the application part is the most important part, because then you become the student, the teacher and the student.
It's like finish the circle. Don't get halfway and love what something can be. Become it and live it fully. Finish the circle.
But there's also the fear of, it's like, the imposter syndrome. Like, do I have enough knowledge to apply this? Like, am I being an imposter? Like, or am I just Or do I need to listen more? Do I need to listen to more of George? Do I need to listen more of Anthony Robbins or whatever? And there's that sense of confidence level that you have to go, no, I'm ready. I know what I know. Time to apply.
A year before EP7 happened, I hit that juncture.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, where I said, I'm not reading any more books. I'm not listening to anything anymore. I now just have to own action on what I know.
Wow.
I made that decision, and it was huge because then it was huge because then I had to pay attention to my environment to see where I could use my better judgment to start actually making different decisions, right? And that's what got me more tuned into fractals and nature.
Right.
Because everything that I had learned had to be detectable in my real-time environment when I needed it to action it. And so I became a lot more present. As soon as I shifted the energy from everyone outside of me knows so much more than me, and I just have to somehow grab enough of it and it will just transform me automatically, that was wrong.
Yes, I totally understand that. Like, I completely understand that.
It's like we're going to get it through osmosis, you know?
Yes. If I read more.
If I'm in the bathtub of knowledge long enough, surely it will go into the pores of my skin and it will possess me with wisdom.
That's actually a very good voice. I like that.
You know, I used to always muck around like I could be a film trailer voice.
Yeah.
You know, in a world.
That is so good.
One man.
Oh my God, that is so
the
good.
odds.
That's insane. But yeah, no, definitely that's the other thing that I got from the course as well. So there's so many things that we learned. I think it was such a blissful experience for me, and I always look forward to it. And I was saying to my wife, here we go. Let's get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
And even at work, my life has changed. You know, now I'm in this immersive leadership course from next week, and people are starting to invite me to leadership meetings, which never happened before.
I don't understand.
Yeah, I've not asked for it.
But you're an imposter.
Yeah.
What's going on?
It was so funny. I was in a meeting, and there were all leaders in there, and I looked like the youngest guy. I mean, because I'm Asian. And so I looked like I was 12, and all these guys with white hair, and
he looks like he's 12, ladies and gentlemen.
And I was wearing a Jordan 1 sort of sneakers. That just made it worse. And I walked in, and with my Jordan 1 sneakers, and everyone was dressed up, and I was like, oh, okay. And what am I doing here? I did not know there was all just leaders. I did not ask for it, but like you said, things started to change within me.
That's right.
That suddenly my
every action has an opposite equal reaction.
Can you please explain that again? Because for the viewers who've heard it for the first time, I find this concept so interesting.
Yeah, okay. So physics, the way objects interact with one another, we are not in a vacuum. Anything you feel compels you to flow in accordance with what you feel based on what you assume. And so that is an outward broadcast of the version of you. And people will experience it through impressions they get of you, through micro facial expressions they get of you. That's part of your broadcast, your tone, choice of words, what you say, don't say, what you do, don't do. That pretty much becomes your brand of consistent action outwards. So then what happens, that shapes the way people feel around you, what they think you are and how you're going to be. And then they decide how much they engage, how much they're attracted, how much they're not. What they can get away with how they treat you, what they can't, how much they want to make a difference to you, how much they don't care. Like all of that becomes the reaction to your action of who you choose to be.
Right.
So every action has an opposite equal reaction, which means all you have to worry about is who you think you are and how you choose to be and what world you think you're in, because that will become your brand of output that then attracts the output of others back onto you.
Now that's all